Before I tell you this story, I want you to picture something. Picture a woman standing outside a house she has lived in for 2 years, suitcases at her feet, a cardboard box under her arm, and a mother-in-law watching from the upstairs window. That woman was me. And that house? That house she threw me out of, with 2 weeks' notice, like I was a tenant who hadn't paid rent. I own it now. Well, not quite own it. But close enough that Margaret Hargrove has spent the past year wishing she had never, ever handed me that fortnight's notice on a Tuesday afternoon in her garden. My name is Clara Whitmore. I am 36 years old. And this is the story of how I went from crying on my best friend's spare bed with 3 suitcases and a broken heart, to becoming the one thing my mother-in-law never saw coming. Stay with me. Because this story does not start with revenge. It starts with love. The kind of love that blinds you to every red flag, silences every instinct, and makes you believe that if you just try a little harder, smile a little wider, be a little smaller, everything will eventually be all right. Spoiler, it won't. But what comes after? What comes after is something else entirely. I met James Hargrove at a work conference in Manchester. He was charming, proper charming, the sort of man who remembers your coffee order after one conversation and makes you feel like the only person in the room. Warm brown eyes. A laugh that filled every corner of a space. He was kind and attentive, and he talked about the future with such easy certainty that I never once doubted it. A home together. A garden. Maybe a dog. He made it sound like it was all already sorted, waiting for us just around the corner. We dated for 2 years. I was, to use a very British phrase, absolutely gone for him. What he did not speak of, not in those early months, was his mother. The first time James mentioned her, something shifted in him. Barely noticeable. A slight tightening of the jaw. A careful choice of words. He said, "Mum's a bit particular," and then moved on quickly. I did not press it. I was in love, and love, as I have since learned, makes you spectacularly blind to the things that will eventually undo you. I met Margaret Hargrove 8 months in, at a Sunday lunch at her home in Cheshire. A beautiful house, detached, double-fronted, pristine garden, curtains so white they looked freshly ironed every single day. I arrived with flowers and a bottle of wine. I was nervous but hopeful. I wanted her to like me. I genuinely, truly wanted that. She opened the door. Looked me up and down, slowly, deliberately. And said, "Oh. You're shorter than I imagined. Not hello. Not lovely to meet you. Not come in, dear. You're shorter than I imagined." I laughed it off. Told myself she was nervous too. James squeezed my hand and whispered, "She'll warm up." She never warmed up, but I kept trying. Sunday after Sunday. Flowers and wine and my best smile, sitting across from a woman who looked at me like something unpleasant she had found on the bottom of her shoe, and I kept telling myself, she just needs more time. We got engaged 18 months later. James proposed at a little Italian restaurant, down on one knee, ring in a blue velvet box, the whole lot. I cried. He cried. The people at the next table clapped. It was perfect. Margaret's response, when James rang her that same evening, was, "Well, I hope you know what you're doing." Not congratulations. Not how wonderful. I hope you know what you're doing. Something small and quiet inside me filed that moment away and did not let it go. The real trouble began about 6 months before the wedding. James's father had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving Margaret alone in that large Cheshire house, 5 bedrooms, 3 reception rooms, more garden than one person could ever use. She'd been rattling around in it, James told me, and she'd been terribly lonely. When James suggested we move in with her after the wedding, just temporarily, just until we got sorted, I understood the logic. I did not like it, but I said yes. Because I loved him. And because he looked at me with those warm brown eyes and said, 6 months, tops. We'll save up, get our own place, and Mum'll have company in the meantime. It's a win all round. 6 months. He said it so easily. We moved in the first week of March. I came with boxes and hope and a genuine, wholehearted willingness to make it work. I kept my things tidy. I offered to cook twice a week. I was careful not to take up too much space, not to seem like I was taking over. Margaret noticed none of it. Or rather, she noticed all of it, and she did not like it. She did not like the way I loaded the dishwasher. She did not like the washing up liquid I bought. She did not like that I sometimes closed the kitchen door while working because I was on a call. "This is still my house," she said one evening, in that perfectly measured tone of hers. Not raising her voice. Margaret never raised her voice. She did not need to. "I would appreciate it if you remembered that." I remembered it, every single day. I told James. He said I was being oversensitive. That Mum was just adjusting. That it was a big change for her. So I tried harder. I bought her yellow tulips, I had noticed she liked them, and left them on the kitchen table with a little card. She moved them to the utility room without a word. 6 months came and went. Then 8. Then 12. The reasons to stay kept shifting. James had a big work project, the property market was tricky, it made more sense to wait just a little longer, and with each passing month, Margaret became more comfortable in her authority, and I became smaller and smaller inside that house. She rearranged our bedroom while James and I were both at work one day. Put my books in a box in the wardrobe. Moved my dressing table to face the wall, because, she explained to James, it reflected the morning light in an irritating way. My dressing table. My books. While I was at work. I was gobsmacked. Completely gobsmacked. But James said she had not meant anything by it. She was just being house-proud. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. My best friend Donna came to dinner one evening and watched the whole performance unfold. Watched Margaret talk over me, redirect conversations away from me, address every remark to James as though I was not sitting right there at the table. On the drive home, Donna rang me immediately. "Clara, love," she said. "That woman is doing it on purpose. This is not you being daft. You need to see it clearly." I did see it. I think I had always seen it. But seeing something and accepting it are two very different things, especially when you are still holding on to the hope that love will be enough to fix what is broken. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough. Here is the moment everything changed. I want you to remember this part. It happened on a Tuesday. I was working from home, I'm a financial analyst, remote 3 days a week, and I had an important presentation at 2 o'clock. I was at the kitchen table, laptop open, notes spread out, completely in the zone. Margaret came in at 1:30. She did not acknowledge me. She began making lunch, loudly, deliberately, clattering pots, running the tap at full force, opening and closing cupboards like she was searching for something she had lost years ago. I took my headphones out, asked, as calmly as I could manage, if everything was all right. "I need the kitchen," she said. Simply. As though that was entirely reasonable. "I have a presentation in 30 minutes, I said. "I will be finished by 2. She looked at me. That look. The one she had perfected over 18 months of practice, slow, unbothered, utterly immovable. "This is my kitchen," she said. "In my house." I packed up my things. Went upstairs. Gave my presentation balanced on the edge of the bed, laptop propped on a pillow, notes sliding everywhere, while trying to sound calm and professional and like my life was not quietly unraveling around me. That evening, the moment James walked through the door, I told him everything. I had been sitting on it all afternoon, the anger, the humiliation, the bone-deep exhaustion of it all. I was knackered. Not tired. Knackered. The kind of tired that sleep does not touch. He listened. He nodded, and then he said, "She's not been well, Clara. Her blood pressure's been up. You've got to cut her some slack." I stared at him. She displaced me from a room. For no reason. "It's her house," he said quietly. And there it was. The thing I had spent 2 years trying not to see, sitting right in front of me, plain as day. James would always choose her. Not out of malice. I do not think he even realized he was doing it. But Margaret had spent 20 years conditioning him to believe her comfort came above all else. And no amount of love for me was going to undo that. 3 weeks later, Margaret asked to speak with me. Alone. James was at work. She found me in the garden having a cup of tea and sat down across from me, hands folded in her lap, expression perfectly composed. I have been thinking, she said, and I do not believe this arrangement is working. I waited. I would like you to move out. She said it the way you might ask someone to pass the salt. Completely calm. Completely certain. I have spoken to James. He agrees it is for the best. The ground shifted beneath me. He agrees? I said. Yes. I will give you a fortnight to sort yourself out. I think that is more than fair. She went back inside. I sat in that garden for a very long time. The tea went cold. The sun moved across the sky. I did not move at all. She had spoken to James. He had agreed. Neither of them had told me. They had decided, between them, without me, that I would simply be removed. Like a piece of furniture that no longer suited the room. A fortnight. She would give me a fortnight. As though I were a lodger who had overstayed her welcome, I moved into Donna's spare room on a Friday evening with 3 suitcases and a box of books. Donna did not ask questions. She made tea, put biscuits on a plate, and sat with me while I cried, the proper ugly kind of crying, the kind you can only do in front of someone who has known you long enough to not find it frightening. James rang that evening. He said he was sorry. That he hadn't known what to say to his mother. That maybe some space would be good for both of us. Space. He called it space. I lay in Donna's spare room that night, twin bed, floral duvet, a little framed print of Paris on the wall, and I waited for the grief to swallow me whole. Instead, something unexpected happened. The noise stopped. The constant low hum of anxiety I had lived with for 2 years, the endless effort of trying to be better, smaller, less, more, whatever Margaret needed me to be that particular week, went completely silent. And in that silence, I heard myself think very clearly, I am done. Not done in a dramatic, door-slamming way. Done in the quiet, deep, irreversible way. The way you know something is finished before you have said a single word about it. I filed for divorce 6 weeks later. James was surprised. I genuinely do not understand why he was surprised. He rang and said he thought we were just taking a break. I said we were not. He asked to meet and talk. I said there was nothing left to say. He mentioned that his mother was gutted. I said I did not care. And I meant every word. I threw myself into work. I had been running at about 70% for 2 years, distracted, drained, operating under a cloud of domestic misery I had mistaken for normal life. With all of that gone, I became sharp again. Properly sharp. My manager noticed. My clients noticed. I received a promotion 4 months after moving out, then a second one 8 months after that. I also began saving. Not vaguely. Not hopefully. Properly, disciplined, spreadsheet on the wall, every single pound accounted for. I had a goal. I was going to buy a property. In my own name, no one else's name on the deed. Just mine. Donna called it my glow up. I called it survival. But it was something more than either of those things. It was becoming, for the first time in a very long time, exactly who I was always supposed to be. The divorce came through 14 months after I arrived at Donna's door with my 3 suitcases. I signed the papers on a gray Wednesday morning and felt, quite unexpectedly, like the sun had come out from behind a cloud that had been sitting over me for years. I went for a walk, bought myself a coffee and a pastry from the little bakery on the corner. Sat on a bench and watched pigeons argue over a chip. It was one of the best mornings of my entire life. Now. This is the part of the story where I need you to pay close attention. Because what happened next was not something I planned. It was not a scheme. It was not a calculated act of revenge. It was something far more powerful than any of that. It was information. James's father, Gerald, had been quietly, solidly clever with money his entire life. He had bought the Cheshire house in the 90s for a price that seemed remarkable then and would be laughable now. In the final years of his life, he had placed the property into a legal trust, a structure designed to protect it and direct where it would go after his death. Margaret had never fully engaged with the details of this arrangement. She found financial matters tedious, and Gerald had always sorted everything. She believed, completely and without question, that the house was hers outright. She had been telling people so for years. It was the foundation of everything, her authority, her certainty, her absolute confidence in her right to do whatever she pleased within those walls, including throwing out her daughter-in-law. I knew about the trust because James had mentioned it once, early in our relationship, offhandedly, in passing. I had filed it away the way I file most things, quietly, without knowing exactly why. 18 months after the divorce, sitting alone in my small flat on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the memory surfaced. And I thought, I wonder what that trust actually says. I want to be clear, I was curious. That is all. But curiosity, combined with professional expertise and a Sunday with nothing else to do, can take you to some very interesting places. I did some research. Public records. Land registry. The kind of work I do every day, simply applied to a situation that happened to be personal. What I found stopped me cold. Gerald's trust contained a provision that Margaret had no idea existed. The house was hers to live in for the rest of her life, but she could not sell it, remortgage it, or leverage it without triggering certain conditions. Upon her death, it would not pass to James automatically. It would be sold and the proceeds divided between James and two charitable foundations Gerald had quietly supported for decades. Margaret thought she owned that house outright. She did not. And then I found the second thing. The thing that truly changed everything. During our marriage, James had borrowed £40,000 from my personal savings. A business investment that had not gone well. We had signed a loan agreement, both of us, witnessed, documented, and in the divorce settlement, he had agreed to repay it over 5 years. He had not paid back a single penny. I sat very still for a long time after I realized what all of this meant. Then I picked up the phone and called a solicitor. My solicitor was a small woman with enormous glasses who had been practicing property law for 30 years. She had the kind of calm, precise intelligence that made you feel, the moment she spoke, that everything was going to be absolutely fine. She listened to everything. Asked several very specific questions. Said, "Leave it with me." 3 weeks later she rang back. "Right," she said, in that brisk way of hers. "This is interesting." She explained that my documented loan, £40,000, signed and witnessed, gave me legal grounds to register a financial charge against the property. Not to force a sale. Not to remove Margaret from her home. Simply to ensure that if the property was ever sold or remortgaged, my debt would be settled first. It was entirely legal. It was entirely legitimate. And it was, she noted, something I had every right to do. I asked her to file the paperwork. 3 months passed, I heard nothing and thought nothing of it. Life continued, the flat, the work, the slow and steady building of a life that was entirely, unapologetically mine. Then Margaret decided to release equity from the house. She wanted a new kitchen, new bathrooms, a renovation she had been planning for some time. She spoke to a mortgage broker. The mortgage broker ran the standard searches. And found my charge sitting right there on the title. I can only imagine the phone call between Margaret and James that followed. I was not there for it, but Donna, reliable, wonderful Donna, who had somehow remained connected to our old mutual circles, heard about it through a friend who had spoken to James. Apparently, Margaret had been, in Donna's exact words, absolutely beside herself. She had not known about the trust provisions. She had not known about the charge. She had not known that the house she had wielded like a weapon, the house she had used to dismiss me, diminish me, and finally remove me, was not entirely hers to control after all. The revelation that I was the specific reason she could not access the money she needed had, by all accounts, hit her very hard indeed. I will be honest with you. When Donna told me, I sat quietly for a moment. I checked inside myself for guilt, for triumph, for anything dramatic. What I found was something much quieter. A kind of still, settled calm, the feeling of a thing being, at last, properly resolved. James rang me himself, eventually. I had not spoken to him in nearly a year. Seeing his name on my phone screen was strange, like finding an old photograph of yourself and barely recognizing the person in it. I answered. He did not shout. He was never a shouter. He spoke quietly, carefully, the way he always had. He said his mother was in a terrible state. He said the situation with the mortgage had come as a complete shock. He paused, then said it was all a bit of a mess. Yes, I said, it is. He asked if we could meet and talk it through properly. I said I did not think a meeting was necessary. Everything that needed communicating could go through the solicitors. Clara, come on, he said. This isn't like you. I thought about the kitchen. The dressing table. The books in the box. The tulips in the utility room. The garden on a Tuesday afternoon, tea going cold, sun moving across the sky, and Margaret sitting across from me with her hands folded in her lap telling me I had a fortnight. Actually, I said, I think it rather is. I returned to my solicitor. I told her I wanted a clean resolution, not dragged out, not dramatic. The terms were simple, the £40,000, repaid in full with the interest specified in the original agreement. Upon receipt, I would release the charge and we would never need to speak again. It took 4 months to negotiate. Solicitors' letters. Counteroffers. One long, uncomfortable phone call that I handled from my kitchen while making pasta, which I found surprisingly helpful. Something about the rhythm of stirring a pot kept me calm. Eventually, an agreement was reached. James sold his car and some investments. Margaret contributed, how much, I never asked, and I did not need to know. What I needed to know arrived on a bright Thursday morning in October, every penny, transferred into my account. £40,000. Plus interest. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at my bank balance for a long time. Then I called the estate agent I had been speaking to for 6 months about a 2-bedroom flat in a converted Victorian building 20 minutes from my office. I put in an offer that afternoon. It was accepted by Friday. And quiet Clara, too short Clara, the woman who brought yellow tulips and got them moved to the utility room, turned out to be precisely the kind of woman who reads the fine print. The house is still standing in Cheshire. I drive past that road sometimes, for work. I have never stopped. I do not need to. I carry it differently now, not as a wound, not even quite as a triumph, but as a chapter. One that taught me more about who I am than any other period of my life. The tulips, when I think of them, make me smile now. Not because of the slight, but because of everything that grew in its place. Some things, it turns out, bloom far better when you stop trying to tend them in the wrong garden. I think that is enough from me. Thank you, genuinely, for listening. Ending lessons, your patience is not weakness, it is power waiting for the right moment. Never let anyone make you feel like a guest in your own life. Margaret's house remained exactly as it was. Hers to live in. Not hers to leverage. Not hers to wield as she once had. My flat, bought in my name, funded by my earnings and my savings and the money that was always, legally, mine, was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. I painted the sitting room a deep, warm teal that my mother called very bold. I put my books on open shelves where everyone could see them. I left my things on the coffee table whenever I felt like it. I bought whatever washing up liquid I pleased. Those freedoms sound small. I know they do. But after years of making yourself smaller and quieter and more careful to exist within someone else's rules, those freedoms feel like learning to breathe properly for the first time. Donna came round the first Saturday after I moved in. No sofa yet, it was arriving the following week, so we sat on the floor and drank Prosecco from mugs and ate takeaway from the boxes and talked for 4 hours about everything and nothing. You did it, she said, somewhere near midnight, looking around at the teal walls and the books and the beautiful, chaotic beginning of a life that was entirely mine. I did, I said. How does it feel? I thought about the garden in Cheshire. The cold tea. The sun moving. The woman with her hands folded neatly in her lap telling me I had a fortnight, as though my life was simply an inconvenience she could schedule away. Like justice, I said. Quiet justice. Donna raised her mug. I raised mine. No grand speeches. No dramatic declarations. Just two women sitting on a floor in a flat that smelled of fresh paint and possibility, quietly toasting the end of something hard and the beginning of something very, very good. Here's what I want to say to you, before I go. There will be people in your life who mistake your patience for weakness. Who read your kindness as permission. Who believe that because you keep trying, because you keep showing up, smiling, adjusting, accommodating, you have no limits. No spine. No line you will not cross for the sake of keeping the peace. They are wrong. You do not need to be dramatic. You do not need to make a scene. You do not need to shout or make grand gestures or explain yourself to anyone who was never listening in the first place. You simply need to get very, very clear on who you are, on what is yours, and on what you are no longer willing to accept. And then you need to act. Quietly. Carefully. With the kind of steady, unhurried determination that does not need anyone's permission or anyone's understanding. Margaret Hargrove threw me out of a house she thought was hers to control. It was not. A 3-bedroom well-maintained, solid bones. The asking price was fair. The rental potential, in that particular postcode, on that particular street, was excellent. I bought it. I want to let that sit for a moment. I bought the house next door to Margaret Hargrove. Not out of spite. I want to be very clear about that. It was a sound investment, the numbers made complete sense entirely on their own merits. But I will not pretend, not even for a moment, that I was completely unaware of the poetry of it. I had a letting agent find tenants within 3 weeks, a young couple, lovely, by all accounts. They moved in on a Saturday morning with a removal van and a small, energetic dog that I was told Margaret found rather noisy. I received my first rental payment the following month. Sitting at my kitchen table, looking at the transfer notification on my phone, I thought about the garden in Cheshire. The cold tea. I am 36 years old. 2 years on from the afternoon I sat in that garden with cold tea and a life that had just been handed back to me in pieces. I want to tell you what those 2 years have looked like. Because I think it matters. The first few months were not easy. I will not pretend otherwise. Healing is not linear and it is not tidy and it does not proceed on a schedule that suits anyone. There were evenings when I sat in Donna's spare room and wondered if I had made the right choice. Mornings when the silence felt less like freedom and more like loss. Moments, particularly in the early weeks, when I missed James. Not Margaret. Never Margaret. But James, the version of James the first had fallen in love with, before I understood that version came with conditions attached. Grief is strange. It does not always make sense. Sometimes you mourn the thing you were right to leave. But it passes. It does pass. Slowly, and then all at once, the way most things do. By month 3, I had stopped checking my phone hoping for a message from him. By month 6, I had genuinely stopped thinking about the house in Cheshire more than once or twice a week. By month 9, I had begun to notice, with some surprise, that I was happy. Properly happy. The quiet, solid kind of happy that does not depend on anyone else's mood or approval or presence. I had not felt that kind of happiness in a very long time. Work became something I looked forward to again. I am good at my job, I have always been good at it, but for 2 years I had been operating at a fraction of my capacity, running on empty, using up energy in that house that should have been going into my career. With all of that gone, I was suddenly firing on all cylinders. My manager noticed. My clients noticed. I noticed, and I let myself feel proud of it, which is something I had not allowed myself to do in longer than I could remember. I started running. Took up a pottery class on Thursday evenings. Began reading again, properly reading, not just skimming a chapter before bed because my mind was too busy to settle. I read 4 books in 1 month and it felt like finding a part of myself I had misplaced years ago. Small things. I know they sound small. But they were not small to me. Word travels in the way it always does in small communities, through Donna, through mutual friends, through the invisible telegraph that connects people who once shared a life and then didn't. I heard that Margaret had told her friends the whole financial episode was a misunderstanding, a paperwork mix-up from years ago that no one had bothered to explain properly. She did not mention my name. She did not mention the loan. She did not mention the fortnight. Very Margaret. Very on brand, as Donna put it, with spectacular understatement. I heard that James had started seeing someone new. A woman named Rachel who, apparently, got along famously with Margaret from the very first Sunday lunch. I felt nothing about this except a brief, involuntary flicker of concern for Rachel, because I knew, better than anyone, what those Sunday lunches looked like from the inside. But it was not my concern anymore. Rachel would find her own way through it. Most people do, when they are ready. The thing about losing something you thought you needed, whether it is a relationship, a house, a version of yourself you have outgrown, is that loss creates space. And space, if you do not rush to fill it with noise and distraction and the first thing that comes along to ease the ache, becomes something extraordinary. It becomes possibility. My flat is not large. It is not in the most fashionable part of the city. The boiler makes a sound on cold mornings that I have been meaning to get looked at for 6 months. The kitchen is smaller than I would like and the bathroom tiles are a shade of beige that I intend to replace the moment I can afford to. But it is mine. Every inch of it. No one else's name on the deeds. No one else's rules on the walls. No one waiting in the kitchen to tell me which cupboard I have opened incorrectly, or watching from the upstairs window with that expression of cool, immovable disapproval. Just me, and the teal sitting room, and the books on the opened shelves, and the washing up liquid of my own choosing. It is, without question, the finest home I have ever had. And if I smile, a small, private smile, every single time I turn the key in the lock, I think I have earned that smile. I really do. Financial knowledge is not just professional, it is personal armor. Kindness does not mean accepting poor treatment. Walk away from what diminishes you, and build something that does not. And always, always read the fine print.